Good evening. I'd like to call our meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Have the clerk please call the roll.
Supervisor Fountain?
Here.
Treasurer Horning?
Here.
Chofiu? Here. Trustee Collier?
Here.
Trustee Germain?
Here.
Trustee Harper?
Here.
Trustee Petrucci? Here.
Thank you. Item number 4 is approval of our meeting agenda.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Treasurer Horning, second by Trustee Harper. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Call to the public. Anybody at call to the public this evening? Nobody at call to the public. We'll move on to item number 6, which is approval of our consent agenda.
Move. Support.
Motion by Trustee Petrucci, second by Trustee Harper. Any discussion?
Regarding the consent agenda, just wanted to note an error that we made in the appointment for Planning Commission. We mistakenly added the word chair there. Obviously, the Planning Commission appoints its own chair. That appointment for the Planning Commission is just to the body and not necessarily to that seat. I apologize for that.
Thank you for that clarification. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We have 3 applicants this evening. Our first applicant, number 7A, is site plan number 524, Fiddler Grove, which is a chestnut development, and this is the final site plan for a plan development. Good evening.
Good evening.
And I apologize, the projectors, we've not been able to get those working, so you can refer to your packets.
With that, I would like to turn this over to Trustee Kalani, who is our liaison to the Planning Commission, and if you could summarize where the applicant is to the Planning Commission, it would be appreciated.
This is the final site plan approval in the plan development agreement, plan development process. This has come before us a couple of times before. I think one of the issues that we wanted to look at was the connectivity to Hacker Road. The site plan here proposes a section there for a period of time, I believe, to make that connection. Should that developer to the west?
No.
Are we on the wrong one?
Yeah,
Yes.
this is the one by
I'm waiting
Autumn
for my computer to come up. I apologize.
This is the one by Autumn.
Okay, all right.
This is ground out.
That's a different one.
This is
The
ground
one behind, we're talking about the one.
This is Steve Grono.
Other side.
Steve Grono. That's
Yeah,
right.
59 and Collins.
That's the San Marino.
Yes. You guys all look the same. For lack of a better word. Okay. I'm sorry. This is the Mr. Gronout's development off of M59 on the south end between Autumn Woods and San Marino. Proposal here is to this is a site plan development final approval. I think all the approvals have been met. I think there were some questions regarding the approval of the final condo documents with having the review by the attorney. I think you guys have taken care of that.
Yes, we have taken care of this. Right.
I'll let the applicant kind of go through.
Yeah, and James actually has an update to that agreement, I believe.
Yes, regarding the plan development agreement, we've been trying to work with Autumn Woods to acquire the easement for the loop of that water main, which is part of the recognizable benefit that is in the agreement. The agreement as it stands, as the draft that you have in front of you, assumes the easement is in hand. That is not the case today. We are working on that. Barring that, there is not a contingency in that language that deals with that situation, and so the language would need to be updated. I've spoken with the township attorney just before this meeting. He's recommending tabling this or postponing this, the final approval of this just briefly until that language is finalized with a final plan development agreement, and that could potentially be this be done this week, assuming everybody worked together. I know Mr. Campbell has spoken with the applicant again right before this meeting, and it sounds like there are a couple of ideas on the table that could resolve this issue. It just needs to be finalized in the plan development agreement language, and then have that come back to the board for approval, and we could do that even at our special meeting next Tuesday. So the recommendation of the township attorney is to postpone approval until that time that we have that language done. Certainly the board can, take a look, review this application, ask any questions.
Did this pertain to the interconnectivity of the improvement of the water main to Autumn Woods?
That's correct, yes.
It had something to do with an easement, correct?
Yeah,
Trying to obtain
part of that main would go along on Autumn Woods property, and they'd have to give an easement for it. They just have not been very responsive. We don't have reason to think that they are not in favor of it. They just have had any reason to act quickly, I should say.
This is, that loop is in lieu of having the developer build the through and through that was originally required under the ordinance. And it also provides, I think Bob can probably testify a little bit more to this, or it provides the loop that we need in terms of, protecting the water users.
Certainly makes their pressures and volumes more sustainable in the event of a fire event.
Fire
as well as just a more reliable system.
And Joan, it's my understanding the rest of the application meets all the criteria?
That is correct.
Okay. Good evening, by the way. Do you have any comments or any thoughts as to where we are?
Mr. Grono, unfortunately, is running a little bit late. I'm sure he would like to discuss this. He may have had some conversations with Dave Campbell this afternoon. I was not privy to those. I can tell you that it's a little bit problematic because we do have our construction plans done. They're going to be submitted tomorrow. We're ready to move this project forward. So I don't know what Mr. Wickham had mentioned, that there was a couple ideas tossed about, for contingency to move this forward, and I don't know what they were without him being here, but, if we could certainly move this thing along. I know he wants to get started. We've got a small window of good weather left, and he would very much like to get this project going this fall yet.
Well, and again, it's my understanding our attorney would like to have that easement taken care of because it's part of the PD process of the improvement.
Sure.
And one of the public improvements that's being offered is this easement, and we want to make sure we have that taken care of. And we do have a special meeting next week,
Next Tuesday,
that would allow us to expedite it as soon as we can get that.
Mr. Gronos just walked in, so maybe he could fill us in on whatever conversation he may have had with Mr. Campbell this afternoon, or what those backup or contingency plans were that were mentioned.
Dave.
Certainly.
Good evening. Good evening. Where we are right now, it's my understanding, according to Trustee Kalani, that the project meets the Planning Commission's recommendations for the PD. However, there's some issues with the easement that ties in the water main through, I believe, Autumn Woods. And at this point, our attorney is recommending that we wait until we have that secured, and we feel that we can get that done. We do have a special meeting next week, and we could add this agenda item. But his recommendation is we wait for that complete packet before we go through with approval, because it's an off-site improvement. It's a public improvement to the site plan. So that's kind of where we are right now. Is the balance of the project is ready to go.
And certainly the board can review and ask questions and look at the balance of the project and so that you're satisfied that you might be ready to approve it next Tuesday with that completed PD agreement. So I would, carry through any other questions you might have.
Matt, do you have any comments or questions? Do any board members have any questions or comments?
So this sketch is really small, and I think we discussed it before. It does have sidewalk in it now?
Because on one side, there's sidewalk.
I can't tell looking at it.
Yeah,
It's broken line.
There was some discussion about the sidewalk, and I think at the end of the day, we concluded that it would be off, there would be a small strip.
Yeah, the Planning Commission motion had the sidewalk 5 foot off of the back curb.
It goes all the way across the front on 59. Any other questions?
So are we moving to table this?
Recommendation from our attorneys to table it to get the easement secured for the improvement.
It isn't, we wouldn't necessarily have the easement secured, just that the language that recognizes the easement won't be in hand before the PD agreement, just to update the language in the PD agreement for that contingency.
So is this a holdup of our attorney, or is this a holdup of the applicant?
Autumn Woods.
Autumn Woods?
Well, I should say, our attorney speaking with the applicant's attorney, we acknowledge that this possibility was an issue if they didn't work expediently, the Autumn Woods didn't work expediently, and there wasn't an interest at that time to put a contingency into the plan development agreement. And without that, it was known that this was a possible outcome. Now that it's here, delaying it until next Tuesday, until we can get that plan development agreement language done, seemed to be a reasonable solution.
James, when the packets were put together last week, did we not know that this easement was going to be completed now, or did we think it would be and we're hoping for the best?
Well, we certainly were hoping for the best. That wasn't necessarily the reason we continued to include it on the application, because at the same time we were also requesting estimates from the applicant on the cost associated with this improvement that we're talking about. We hadn't received those yet. I understand that we may have those tonight, but we didn't have them yet, and we were hoping to have gotten them so the engineer could review it, because the first option on the table was to simply put those monies into an escrow to secure that improvement in the future. I understand that there's been other conversation about another solution that may be amenable, but we've got to finalize that language.
What does the owner think of this?
Well, obviously at this point in the year, every day is money. Another week delay is, when I wake up in the morning and the sun is shining, it's not raining, it's a good day to be building and getting things in the ground. And at this juncture, it's a crucial part of our financial picture to get going, get started, get this thing in the ground. So every day it goes into a table motion or a delay is costing us money. So what I proposed when I spoke earlier to your planning director was, look, if the issue is Autumn Woods and they've fallen silent and haven't granted the easement, and we may have to go to condemnation, it takes time, I understand all that, that's all fine. All I want to do is get in the ground what I need to get in the ground and stub it to the property line. I will complete the water main at whatever point in time that the township has access and easement, as I have already committed to in the PUD agreement. So I guess what it falls down to is, are we going to be asked to write a check for the full amount of the cost of putting that pipe in the ground up front before you have the easement, possibly up to 2 years before? I mean, condemnation sometimes takes, as your attorney will tell you, it's a 2-year deal, one to 2 year deal. To have my 40 or 50 grand sitting in the bank at the township when I could be using it to get my development done is kind of a crippling effect on my cash flow. So my request to the board is to consider allowing, I'm looking for an approval tonight. I want to get submitted with our final construction drawings, which David has already prepared, is ready to submit to the township engineer tomorrow morning. That's going to take probably a week or two just to get through the township engineer's review so that Mr. Campbell can give us land use. So we already have kind of a waiting period. And during that waiting period, what I would propose is we'll get the two attorneys together to draft the amendment to the PUD agreement, which will provide the assurances to the township that you have what you need to get that water main extension done at my expense sometime in the future. We don't know when that's going to be. But I think it is a very inefficient use of my cash to let it sit in an escrow account starting 2 weeks from now for 2 years while we're waiting for that easement to be granted.
What makes you think it's going to take 2 years?
That was the historic procedural time frame on condemnation if Autumn Woods doesn't cooperate.
If it comes to
Condemnation, you can get the property right away, and the issue regarding compensation may take years.
Right.
I mean, a judge can look at the necessity and make a determination.
Sure. Whatever time it takes, it's fine with it. I have no issue.
We have to go that route.
Right. I'm happy to, I've already committed to paying for this extension as part of our agreement, and I'm good to do that. I'm just asking you not to take the money out of my pocket until it's needed to spend it on the improvement. That's what I'm asking for. I want to get going. I want to get this thing built.
And usually that would be our first course of action. That's though I think I emailed the board yesterday about that path. I understand your conversation with Mr. Campbell suggested another idea that would wait till the tail end of the development and to hold maybe a couple land use permits on the last couple of units.
Yeah.
And that seems like it's probably reasonable outcome to this, and that we could nail that. I mean, if I don't know that it would necessarily hold things up, that if we were to wait on finalizing the approval of the site plan and the PD one more week, that in the meantime, we could go ahead and accept those construction plans and begin the review process on our end simultaneously, that we would be delaying it, because that's the next step, as you said, right? Submit it to us, giving the time for our attorneys and for our review of the construction plans. We would still commit to doing that on a parallel path while we wait for the PD agreement language to be finalized.
That would be great, and I think everybody would. I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I think if it's
just go on a parallel path.
Yeah, it's just a matter of let's have an agreement tonight. We know what we're doing, so that the attorneys can be given some direction from the board and from me on how it's going to work out. What I suggested to David was, I said, look, it's $77.95 a linear foot to put in the improvement. We have a current hard bid on it from a reputable contractor. So if you do the math, it's 400 feet. Whoever has a calculator can tell me what that is. $35,000. I would propose that the last two land use permits, I'm going to build in sequence, lot number 1 through lot number 25. The last two lots that we build will be 24 and 25. Withhold my land use permits on the last two lots in the PUD agreement until that improvement is either already in, it's already been done by the time we get there. It'll be 2 years before we're done. 12 units in 2016, 12 units in 2017. So sometime during that time, if we get the easement from Autumn Woods, I'm on that water main, it's done. And we don't have any issue. If by the end of that time, I'm ready to build number 24, and we don't have the easement, then I'll write the check and hand it over to the township. I mean, does that sound fair?
Yeah, I think everybody agrees that we can come up with that language pretty simple. That's why I think it shouldn't be an issue for next Tuesday. And if we're reviewing the plans in the meantime, we'll hopefully keep you on track then.
I'll move to table to October 13th.
Support.
Have a motion to table in a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion carries.
So if you could please go ahead and submit those, and I'll work with the planning director to make sure the reviews get started.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't
thank
think this
you.
will be a problem. I don't think this is an issue.
Thank you. Item number 7B is site plan number 530. It's Walnut Ridge Estates, Plan Development Preliminary Plan. Good evening. Joe, good evening.
To just restate what I said at the beginning.
No, this is a preliminary plan, correct?
Preliminary plan, correct. Bring it up here. This is before you is preliminary plan development for site plan for Walnut Ridge Estates, site plan number 530D. Planning Commission included had a certain amount of conditions on September 24th. This is the development that is located north of the Venture Church. It was all part of the Venture Church plan development. I think all the issues have all the issues have been dealt with. There is been a significant amount of coordination between the developer and another separate developer to the west, Mr. Rotundo's project. The site plan takes into consideration a lot that would allow for a connection should that development come in at a certain point in time to allow access all the way to Hacker Road. If that doesn't happen, then there's the alternative to allow, because this development requires 2 access points, and there's an alternative in the plan. Do you want to add anything at this juncture?
We're all set. We understand the township planner's memorandum, and we concur with it. For the preliminary, we'll be back before both the Planning Commission and Board for final.
I'll make a motion to
I have a question. Under the land division itself, you look like you're going to put the housing into 2 separate, I'm looking at 2 different phases. Is part of the PD agreement that they're allowed that open space as part of the Venture Church, or is this a standalone open space? I was just curious as to how that...
Because it's one PD, the entire property, it's all considered
Shared.
together, so the open space is a combination.
The open space is shared amongst the whole PD.
trails.
Yes,
But the phases will be the homes and the infrastructure, including that internally separate.
correct.
But they all have access to that open space.
Yes, they do.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary plan development site plan for Walnut Ridge Estates, site plan number 530, subject to the 530P, subject to the conditions of approval included in the Planning Commission's motion of September 24, 2015.
Support?
Motion by Trustee Kalani, second by Trustee Germain. Is there any discussion?
How much time do you think will lapse between now and final?
Well, what we expect we'll be back for final sometime over the winter. We expect construction to begin in the spring.
Any other questions? Being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 7C is site plan application 535-C, Newberry Place. It's a planned development concept plan. Good evening. This is a parcel on the north side of M59 by Fenton Road. Interesting that it's actually, you picked Newberry Place, at least on a temporary basis. That was the original name of the development, starting as I think it was late 1990s is when this first came up as an opportunity. This was also known as called a special planning area. This was designated in our master plan and future land use due to the research that we did in I think it was our 2004?
Yeah, it was before, actually, when we first...
Master plan, when we went through it, and this was mixed-use development that really had both homes and retail on the north and south side of M59. With that, Joe, would you like to overview, then we can have the applicants
Well,
have any discussion?
You kind of gave a little bit of the discussion. What was interesting is that, the owners here from Newberry Homes, excuse me, am I saying that? Mayberry Homes, excuse me. Appreciate that. Sorry about that. One of the things that came before the Planning Commission was that they stuck pretty close to some of the previous plans that the previous developers were looking at. You were looking at the way in which, this is really our first opportunity to see some of the product that Mayberry Homes is going to be proposing for the sites on the north and the south side. It would be helpful. It's too bad we don't have the overhead working tonight, because I think that the public should see some of the proposed architectural houses, the architectural examples of what you're proposing at the site. There's going to be apartments, there's going to be single-family homes, and some detached condos. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Why don't you kind of go through a little bit of how many units are being proposed for the site and ideas for the commercial area?
Well, when we first optioned to buy the property, we looked at the plan, and usually I'm a frustrated designer, so I usually think, well, I'm going to start over. But as I looked at the plan, I liked a lot of the core pieces to it. So we've worked around that, and we don't have an overhead. But if you'll notice on the north side, around the perimeter, we started out with townhouses, row houses, all the way around, which had an alley at the back. So for the neighbors, they got to see an alley and then a line of garages on long buildings. Whenever possible, I try to do detached. I prefer that over attached. So there's a product we call motor court. So you do a 4-unit cluster off a common driveway and then split into 4 units. The 2 units in the back or towards the adjoining property are set at 45-degree angles. What that does is soften that whole outer perimeter. Also, I think I believe it's a much more valuable product to make. So that's a substitution that we made. We're also substituted a different building, but basically the same concept for apartments. We're using substantially or all of the units will have attached garages with direct access into their unit from the garage. We think it's the current thinking in somewhat upscale apartments. So that's our core on the north side. And then the frontage along 59, we're looking at commercial. On the south side, we have a couple people interested in some of the commercial property and elderly facility on the north side. So we have some interest on the 59 frontage now. On the south side, we've left some of the area flexible as to whether it's commercial or multifamily on the south side along 59. And in the back, we've modified the residential detached product of what was there originally from the Newberry plan. And being Mayberry Homes, we kind of thought it was divine providence or something that it's Newberry Place and Mayberry Homes. So we like the name, and so far we've kept that. We had a market study done, and we also looked at the market study the township had done to see what was needed. And then we had a specific market study done on this property. It suggested 3 different single-family types. I think we're going to end up with 4. It called for up to 270 units of apartments. If we put apartments on both sides, we will meet that. Otherwise, we may be lower on the apartments than what our market study recommended. So we're trying to follow that market study reasonably well. So we've modified the design with some updated product, a little bit of an updated feel, and by and large, it's substantially the bones of the project that if you've been here for a while, you probably have already seen.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the architectural, you mentioned at the Planning Commission about the type of what you like to see in your houses as opposed to some other kinds of developments that you generally see in new housing today, you know?
Well, we think on a community level, so we really like to have a look and feel and a targeted market and go after something that ties together as opposed to just doing homes or just doing houses. Our homes, if you start with the apartments, it's one of the terms is called big house. It looks like a large house from all 4 sides. So it doesn't have the kind of hard apartment building look from any side. Every side looks like it could actually be just a big house. So the scale and the architectural detail are quite attractive. And there, what we're looking for is putting a product in place that we don't see a lot of, and trying to go maybe a notch above most of what's available. And we think that's the market. We think there are some people who will become permanent renters. In the past, everyone ended up with a house. I think there's a shift. So we're seeing some people that are longer-term renters. On the motor court, we have done that in Lansing, and we create little private patios. Most of our homes have the large porches. We try to keep the garages back from the front. I don't like garages projecting out. And we theme with looks and feel on all 4 sides. I like 4-sided architecture. I don't like overdoing fronts and then vinyl sides and a vinyl back, and it looks to me a bit like a Hollywood facade. We like it to look good from all positions. We live three-dimensionally, and so should the house. So that's a bit. We work with some nationally recognized architects. Currently, we're working with Mike Woodley, who's probably won every award you can win in residential architecture. And so we use them to inject new ideas and thinking, and then we work locally with people to develop the plans. So I think I'm a frustrated designer, like I said, so we play with that quite a bit.
What would be the largest residential lots, and what would be sort of the smallest residential lots that we're looking at?
55-foot frontage up to 80-plus foot frontage.
And it would be your expectation that this would be a phase project?
Yeah.
And hence being the north side would be the first phase?
Yes, when I got into this, originally we're by and large single-family home builders. So it appears the north is the right side to start with, but that's not getting me to what I really came to do, which is on the south side. So we're seeing if we can push in one phase or a second phase following close behind the first phase to get us into the single-family residential, which is what we want. So the north will be done by and large as a project. The apartment project will be done on a project basis. The surrounding houses will be for sale, but they will be done 4 at a time. But I'm trying to get some of the commercial possibly going on the south side, get the entrance in, and be able to push into some single-family lots, which is what I'd really like to get into.
You mentioned at our informal some ideas of the transfer between the commercial and the residential. Some of the roads that may have some more of a residential feel, but it might have a commercial application. Can you maybe explain that a little bit better for everybody here, just what your thoughts are? I thought that was really interesting how you...
I'll try to remember what I said then.
This was on the south side,
yes,
where you went from the commercial to the residential.
Well, in dealing with an architect I work with in Florida, Don Evans, he's saying that a lot of even the McDonald's in different places are doing much more of a residential type of unit. So the commercial we have, I want to be... I want to flow into residential. I don't want to drive through a harsh commercial area to get to a residential area. So we're maintaining architectural control of anything that we do in that area. And the idea would be to line it with something that has a very soft residential, architecturally sound feel and ties into the neighborhood, either by doing attached apartments along that, especially the boulevard entrance, or having the commercial be a similar look and feel to the residential.
Questions from the board? Mr. James?
If I may, I just had a conversation with Mr. Campbell. I do know, or I recall, that you have some of your partners on this development potentially ready to get going sooner than the rest of it. And so any of these commercial elements that are just rectangles right now, for the next phase of your plan development, you really should be putting the best site plan to be there, because if you go through this whole process and those are just rectangles, you'd have to come through for an amendment. But if you put a site plan for something that is substantially similar to what could come later, then it's just a straight site plan. So whatever you have to draw in the access and what kind of uses that could be and what that building might look like in this part of the PD process will help you out later.
Thank you. Yeah. And we are working on that.
Questions from the board?
I have a couple. At this point, does the applicant have any concerns with installing the water system to the township standards?
The private water system? I can't say that I'm fully familiar with the township standards, but that would certainly be our intention, yes.
And there was many pages of material to review, and I don't recall reading if you have a projection on the number of REUs that will be needed based on the combination of commercial and residential that's planned at this point.
And I don't have that off the top of my head, in part because there's a couple of flexible partials, whether they're going to be higher density residential or commercial. And then the calculation if they're commercial, I'm not that familiar with, so we would need to run that.
Okay.
But we're trying to balance out close to the REUs of the original project.
Right. The next question is, I'm just hedging whether I should ask this or not, but as I recall the original special planning area from years ago, there was discussions about setting aside some property for a fire department extension or some type of public use as part of that. Has that come up at this point? I can address that to Joe, or not at this point?
Not at this juncture. The applicant is aware of our requirements under the PD agreement. We haven't really got into that. It might be at a more informal level with Dave Campbell, but it hasn't been brought up at the Township Planning Commission.
I know at the tail end of the Planning Commission meeting, there was discussion that that recognizable benefit piece is out there. I think the previous developer had looked at putting money into a fund for future maintenance or improvements to Pleasant Valley Road in the end, and not the fire station piece. Allotting some property for a future fire station could be a recognizable benefit as well. It's really up to the applicant as to what they might propose. Those are some ideas.
And I realize this is still very conceptual, at this stage. And that brings me to my last question. Just for my own benefit, and perhaps for the rest of the board members here, what is the long-term process to get approval for construction here? Right now, we're at a conceptual PD plan. The next step is...
So yes, step one of a three-phase step. The plan development starts at conceptual. It's done that at Planning Commission, is doing it now here. There's actually no formal action for the board to take this evening.
Correct.
Just give their feedback and their guidance so that when they submit their preliminary plan development site plan to the Planning Commission is the second phase. That's where the heavy lifting done, the biggest design work and really kind of getting down into what's being proposed. That goes to the Planning Commission, back to the board, and then the final, and we've done all three phases of that tonight. We had a preliminary, a conceptual, and a final tonight, is where the plan development agreement gets approved, and it's obviously the final approval for land use permits to go from there after construction plans.
So the applicant has to have a very, very good idea on how he wants to develop the property when he gets that final approval, even though the construction phase may, I hate to use the word linger, but it may take a number of years to get
it. Could be phased, just like Ramco's. They have a plan development and has been a number of years. But because that plan development's in place, every new piece that comes in, because of the pattern book and everything else that they've put there, it's just a simple site plan from there.
Well, I can speak for myself. I like everything I've seen so far. I agree with what Joe is saying. The building concepts really looks attractive to me. I think it would be a big sell.
I did have, you brought up the pattern book, and the pattern book, for those that may not know, the original developer had a lot of consistency between uses, i.e. they had streetlights that were similar and different things. Sidewalks were connected, all kind of together. There was maybe a theme to it. Would you suggest that you're maybe following that pattern book a little bit, or using it as maybe a template?
We could, or we'll revise it.
Not necessarily the exact same layout, but those kind of concepts.
No, when we build communities, that's what I was saying. We like to have a look and feel and a tie-in of that community. So, similar ideas.
I've seen your single-family inside and out. My niece just bought one up on Acadia in Lansing. It's a really nice product.
Thank you.
Nice home.
Any other questions this evening? I think we're all set. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to 8A, which is pending new business. 8A is a RU transfer from Venture Church. The applicant that was here earlier, Venture Church originally purchased that, I believe, 80 acres and had X amount of RUs on it. And now that they're going forward with residential, they're going to be transferring a certain portion of those RUs, sewer RUs, correct?
Yes.
To the balance of that property that's going to be residential.
And this one's a little different because there are two phases proposed, and there's a split along those lines. This normally is a pretty straightforward process. We would have put it on the consent agenda, but that would have been cart before the horse a little bit before you had a chance to approve the plan development. So in this case, it is being divided into phases. However, we're not putting any sewer RUs on that furthest back child parcel. The balance of the RUs will stay on the parent parcel with the M59 frontage, and until such time as that phase 1 is built and they're ready to build on phase 2. At that time, they'll have to come in for a transfer of RUs to the second phase parcel, and then that arrangement would give us security. Obviously, we have a concern to make sure that the assessments are continuing to be paid and lands aren't just let go to tax foreclosure for lack of payment.
So Venture Church would take roughly half of the ones that they don't need and continue making payments on that until the second phase comes along. Then they would transfer those over.
Yeah, and even if we transfer the RUs to that second phase piece, the original property owner would still own it because they're doing a sale in 2 phases as well. So they're still making the payment. It's just the RUs stay with the parent parcel.
Okay. James, I was just trying to find out, there's a lot of information in here on this, where the actual, where would the motion be in?
Page 443.
It's right here. Move to approve the transfer of 34 sewer RUs from Venture Church parent parcel to the proposed Walnut Ridge Phase 1 child parcel, contingent upon owner and administrative approvals of the land division.
Support.
Motion by Treasurer Horning, second by Trustee Harper. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item number 8B is road fund budget amendments. Manager Wickman?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. And really my apologies for BNC. We did not have the foresight to have the budget amendments approved at the same time that you've already approved the action. Obviously, we've undertaken the work. You've approved the contracts. These 2 budget amendments just take care of the accounting piece. I offer the proposed motions. Happy to answer any questions.
I'll move to approve the road improvement budgets amendments as presented.
Support.
Motion by Trustee Kalani, second by Trustee Harper. Any discussion?
Just the one question on the village drain project costs. What's that? Is that a bill that? Why are we incurring that at this time, or is that going to the drain office? Or?
We agreed to commission HRC to start that study, and it was at our cost.
Okay. Yeah. Is that going to be added to the project cost when we ultimately decide how that's going to get spread?
Yes.
So that may get recovered or may come out of that piece that you have allocate as an at-large portion.
That too, yes. Yeah, we could allocate it as at-large as well.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. And number 7C is, 8C is water fund budget amendments, and those were for the capital improvements that were needed to be purchased?
The purchase of equipment and supplies that the board previously approved. This is the budget amendment.
Move to approve the budget amendment for the water system as presented.
Support.
Motion by Treasurer Horning, second by Trustee Petrucci. Any discussion?
I'm just curious why the internet is part of that cost. What is that? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, historically, water treatment plant internet connection for the SCADA.
For the SCADA,
Was
okay.
paid for by UNAC or they were responsible for all of it. Now we're going to have to, and there was a setup fee because they took the modem and everything out of there and they left. So it's a one-time fee.
Okay, I'm just, it's not a lot of money, but it's just one of those things that I look at and I went, okay, thanks.
Did we have a motion on that one? We're all set? No other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item number 9 is board and manager reports. This is our first meeting in October. Start with Clerk Shofu.
No report.
Treasurer Horning.
Actually, the ladies' auxiliary that Mr. Sacco gathered up and got the people to start, you had to have 10. We're up to 21 members now, and quite a great board going of some real active people. And
That's the veterans?
the veterans, ladies' auxiliary is part of the veterans. And since we had no money in the bank account at all, except our dues, they threw together a bake sale Saturday at the farmer's market, and the weather wasn't that great, and they made $170. So, something real quick and easy, but it sounds like it's going to be a great group to work with, and a lot of good is going to come out of it for our veterans.
Thank you. Trustee Kalani.
I have nothing to report.
Treasurer Germain. Trustee Germain.
No report.
Trustee Harper.
No report.
Trustee Petrucci.
I don't have a report.
Just a reminder that we are going to have a State of the Township meeting Monday, October 19th at 4 o'clock. It'll be held here. And we do have invitations out to U.S. State Representative Bishop and our Hank Walpel and Joe Hune. And at this point, they've all stated, I think, that they're planning on being here. So we'll have those VIPs plus many others. Do you have to RSVP for that, James, or just...
It is not, because the public is welcome, our business community is welcome. We're trying to encourage people to come on out.
Okay. It'll be a short presentation, and then we'll open it up for networking. And while we have those folks here, people can reach out and ask any specific questions they may have for them. I have nothing else this evening. We'll move over to Manager Wickman and his comments.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just a reminder, I didn't know it this time around, but we do have those requests for qualifications coming in this week for attorney services, for our IT, and for our engineering. So if any board members are interested in taking a look at those proposals or being a part of our interview panel, just please let me know that. We'll be working on that process through November. So. And again, that is we do that from time to time. It's been actually beyond the 5 to 7 years I usually suggest for some of these. So it's not necessarily that we're displeased with our current providers. It's just a good opportunity to evaluate those, how that relationship's working, and if there's a need to change or not, we'll decide that as we go through. I do have also a reminder then on the work session next Tuesday, the 13th at 6:30. We'll be here, and we're working on that agenda now to talk about compensation philosophy. Reminder on the State of the Township is to also please remember your name tags that you have with the township logo. We'll have names, badges for our guests as well. And I did just want to note, and maybe we can have a quick conversation about the private road SAD issue. We do have one of our subdivisions interested in doing a private road SAD. They've also asked to include the sidewalks. As it is, we don't, Act 188, the SAD Act, allows us to do an assessment district for sidewalks on private property. The policy that's in place now only speaks to private roads. And so if the question is the board inclined to consider doing an SAD for sidewalks, storm sewer, lighting, those types of improvements that are eligible under the Act, though they're on private property. If the board's so inclined, we can offer some revisions to the policy so that that's cleared up. I don't know if there's any objections to that, or?
I think that we should, I think the intent there was to allow private property owners or private developments to be able to do that. And with the rise of site condominiums and more the fact that the infrastructure is going to be responsibility of those residents, we need to have a way for them to petition like they do with private roads. So I would support those changes.
Matt, do you have any thoughts on that?
I agree with Joe. We should modify our policy and cooperate with those organizations that choose to improve their living environment.
Kathy, you're for that?
Yeah.
Agree. Yeah. Larry, Joe?
Yes. Yep, 100%. Absolutely.
I think you have a consensus that those would be acceptable.
Sounds good, and we'll bring those policy revisions. I know the residents over there are excited for those improvements as well. So,
one of the things we may want to do as a township is on these site condominiums is to, if they haven't, encourage, I don't know, maybe a top 10 good condo practices. I think that they have the ability to, they're supposed to be setting aside monies for reserves for their infrastructure. I don't know if many of them do that. If they're not, they really need to. And one of the policy requires a deposit for some of the work that needs to, the upfront work before you go through that process of an Act 188 process there. Mm-hmm. So township is, I'm really concerned that that with the rise of site condominiums, that there's not enough, perhaps some of these homeowners associations haven't been proactive enough to set aside reserves, and maybe we need to talk a little bit about that.
Have like what the process would entail if they're interested?
Well, the process at the township, but
if you're a homeowners association, these are the steps that you would have to take if you wanted the SAD process.
And then a little part of that is, to encourage homeowners associations to go through that process of making sure they're setting up a reserve fund.
Got it.
That kind of thing, because they don't want to come to us and then suddenly, well, we don't have any money. When they should be looking at trying to at least set aside reserves. I think there's no hard and fast rule, but 10% a year typically is 10 to 15% of their homeowners' assessment should be set aside for reserves is kind of the rule of thumb, I think. That's what I understand.
Thank you. Anything else?
Happy to answer any questions.
I just have one. Could you or Bob provide us an update on the sewer improvements for Lake Tyrone?
Yeah, I can try to find that email. We just got a letter last week that outlined the construction schedule. Do you know that off the top of your head?
I'm going to do the best I can, so bear with me. Basically, the contractor, the name of it is Rothenberger Incorporated. They have been given a green light to go ahead and start construction. What they're going to attempt to do is try and directionally bore the sewer main down Bullard prior to winter. And pretty much that's all they're going to do prior to winter with the directional drilling or horizontal drilling. What they're going to try and do for the remainder of the winter time is build and install the pump station on site. The remaining infrastructure that needs to be horizontally drilled will start in spring. So they're a little worried about the frost laws and whatnot, so they really kind of, I don't want to say, they were very conservative in what they were looking to get done prior to snowfall, but their plan is to essentially construct that lift station, the pump station, at that time, throughout the winter.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Manager Wickman?
No, but there is one question. On Lake Tyrone also, Aren't they looking at doing some aeration? The homeowners association, and they going through the Lake Improvement Board for that, do you know?
They are going through the Lake Improvement Board for that. That has been, the contractor has been awarded for that, and they are proceeding on that. What we're trying to do right now is they have the site for the air compressor, where that's going to go. The only anomaly right now is how to get the air line from the air compressor to the lake, because it's actually a distance of about 500 feet. So, minor detail, they do have a contractor lined up. It only has to be buried about 18 inches, so I wouldn't even call it a setback.
Thanks.
Thank you. At this point, we'll take a brief recess, and we will go into our work session.